Okay, so welcome back to Space Engineers. Now I haven't done a video in a while, but this is going to be a tutorial or how-to on how to build a small ship. Now this isn't going to be this is the only way to build a small ship, because there's no way to build anything in Space Engineers, but this is basically what you need in order to have a functioning ship. Now as we can see, I've actually built up a kind of thing that showcases everything that you can mostly build on a small ship. There are a couple of other things that I've missed out, but they're not vitally important, or they don't serve any great purpose. But first of all, the one thing that you need in any ship is power. Now there's actually three sources of power for a small ship. Going from left to right, we have a battery. Now a battery is a chargeable source of power, so it will store it and then be used up, but it doesn't actually create power itself. That's what the nuclear reactor's for. Now you've got two types. You've got the large one here. Now notice that it's got a conveyor door on it. We will talk more about these in a little bit, but these will be important, so just wait for that and just keep those in your head. Now the large reactor does create quite a lot of power, but it takes up quite a large space, which is why I've got the small nuclear reactor as well. It creates a lot less power, but it fits in a smaller, tighter space. So that's the power. We now go on to manoeuvrability. Now for manoeuvrability and direction and stuff like that, we've got the gyroscope. Pretty self-explanatory, lets you turn around and all that kind of stuff, and basically stops you from overspinning and controls the ship. Nice and simple. Now thrusters, there's actually two types of thrusters for the small ship. First of all, you need power from a power source, obviously, to actually get them running. But you've got the large one, which does take up more power but does have more thrust, but it also takes up more space. And then you've got the smaller one, which does basically the same job, only it doesn't provide as much thrust, but takes up a small amount of space and uses less power, basically. And that's the two different variants of the thrusters. That's all there is in the vanilla game. Then we go into cockpits. Now the cockpits are very important because it's where you actually control the ship from. There's only two for small ships. There's this one, which is the bog standard one, which is quite small and is enough to fit one person in, and has a couple of connection points. There's this one, which is the fighter cockpit, which is actually slightly longer, same width, but does provide more visibility out of it, and it does have different connection points onto it as well, which I'll get onto later when I'm actually building the ship in the video. There are a couple of other differences, like there's different materials needed to build each one and all that kind of stuff, but that's not important in this video. But also, as well, you do need oxygen, which is part of the life support system. Now, there's two ways to actually put oxygen into a small ship. You've got an oxygen container, which is on the left, or you've got an oxygen generator, which is on the right-hand side of it. The main way that I've found to do this is basically by connecting those straight to the cockpit. That's the easiest way to actually integrate them into the ship. You only need one of them, but you can have both if you wish. They work slightly differently. But for any ship, if you're actually planning on connecting it, because basically at the moment we've got a general setup for a ship, that will be working in a non-survival situation. If you did want to connect it to a station or a large ship, you would need one of these, which is a connector. Now what this does is basically, you can see it's got the conveyor door at the front there. It can connect to another connector and form a bridge between the two, which means that you can ferry supplies in between your small ship and your station. It's very useful, and it does a heck of a lot. Then we've also got this, which is the collector. It's a similar job to the connector, but it doesn't actually fasten to anything. This can only collect things, so you can drop things from another ship into your ship and have it being collected and not have to worry about it being wasted or being lost. Moving on to MISC type blocks. This one is actually just an extender block for the larger tubes and other things like that. It's one block high. There is a very good reason for this, but I can't explain it yet because I haven't gone on to the actual tubes yet. But next we have the ejector, which actually does a similar job to the conveyor, only once again I don't think it connects. I may be wrong on this, I haven't tested it, but it's a lot smaller, and basically it does a similar job to the connector, but instead of collecting it, it spits things out. So you've got two different things, you know, one of them ejects things, one of them spits them out, but this can only do fairly small objects as well. That has to be noted because it does only fit a small tube on the back of it, whereas the connector and the collector have large tubes. So something to bear in mind, you know, depending on what ship you're building. Now next, because in order to have a ship ready for survival, it needs to have a lot of plumbing in it, and this is the plumbing. Basically, these are connectors. No, they're not connectors, they're conveyors, sorry. This is a conveyor block. Basically, you've got two versions, a small one and a large one. The large one has 6 small ports on it and 4 around the outside of it. The small one has 6 small ports on it. Basically, the smaller one is used for the smaller tubes and the large one is used for a mixture of both. There is a reason for this and I'll get onto it in a minute. Once again, you've got the tubes, same kind of thing again. One's big, one's small, can carry different things and all kinds of things like that. And also the little spacer that we had before, that's also part of the large tubing section, but I didn't manage to fit it in. And then we've just got a simple angle, you know, a 90-degree angle, which will let you make turns and stuff without having to use a conveyor block itself. These are the only 3 things that will actually let you move things around the small ship. And you need to, well, to have anything ready for survival, you need to have it plumbed up. So basically you need your nuclear reactor, your oxygen generator or your oxygen tank, and your connector all connected up through those pipes with the plumbing system, and then that will make it survival ready. We will go through this when I'm actually building the ship once again, but this is just to tell you what everything does. Now, moving up to the 3 things on top, these are cargo containers. 3 sizes this time for the small ship. You've got the small one on the far left, which is very small. It's a 1x1 block and can fit a fair amount of stuff, but not too much. And bear in mind, it can only fit small items like ore and stuff. Moving on, we have the medium cargo container, which can hold both ore and kind of like construction components and stuff and other things like that, because construction components can only fit through the large conveyor door, whereas ore can fit through the small conveyor door. That's a key thing. And then we've got the large cargo container, which once again can do the same as the medium, but does it on a bigger scale and can carry more. I've never actually seen a design use the large cargo container on a small ship, but I'm sure I will find one someday that does actually incorporate it into the design. I think it's just so big that no one can really find a use for it yet. That doesn't involve the medium cargo container anyway. But now, up to this point, we've got all of our general systems up and running. We've plumbed it all in, you know, everything's working, we've got space to store stuff. Now, we need to find a purpose for the ship. A purpose for the ship can range from anything, basically. You know, you can have a ship built for anything in Space Engineers, but there are a couple of tools that helps you determine what a ship's actually used for. You know, all the stuff that we've put in so far, that's just everything that every single ship needs. Now these are the utility tools, which are, well, I call them utility tools. On the left hand side you've got a drill. Now this is used for mining. It's got 2 small doors, small conveyor doors either side of it, and that's because ore fits through these small conveyor tubes. Well, basically that's it for the drill. You know, it collects the ore that you dig into it and then it puts it through the conveyor system into a cargo container. That's why you'll see quite a few mining ships use the small cargo containers, because you can fit quite a lot of ore in them. Moving on though, we have the grinder, which is very useful if you're deconstructing things and you don't want to go around with a hand grinder all the time. This on the back of it actually has a large conveyor door, because components that are used for building, like steel plates or construction components or silicon or anything like that, can only be put through the large conveyor system, because they take up quite a lot of space and obviously they're quite bulky. There is a size requirement for some things, obviously, and some ships will automatically become bigger because of the things that they're designed to do. You know, because obviously the larger tubes take up a lot more space, so you really need to think ahead when you're doing a ship build. But next to the grinder we've also got the welder. Now I like to stick a grinder and a welder on the ship, because then it's multi-purpose. You know, so you got it for deconstructing and constructing. it's easier than making 2 separate ships, although 2 separate ships isn't really a bad idea because then they're specialised for one specific task, you know, and you can have them both off doing separate things. But that's the utility tools for these ships. Moving on, you say, you know, you might not want to build a utility ship, you might want a fighter. Well, we have some armaments here. Starting from the right hand side this time, we've actually got a Gatling gun. It's got 2 of these small conveyor doors either side of it, and that's because the ammo for the Gatling gun is fairly small, so it can fit through the small conveyor system. Next to that, we have a rocket launcher. Now this actually doesn't use the conveyor system. This has to be manually reloaded from actually clicking K on the front of it, and then you have to manually put the rockets into it. But next to that, we've got an auto reloading rocket launcher which uses the large conveyor doors. That's because the torpedoes that they actually fire are quite big, but this will automatically reload them. So if you notice, you've got 4, so you can fire a volley of 4 and then it will automatically start reloading, which is actually quite useful, and on something like this it does make a heck of a lot of difference on a small ship where you'd have to hop out and then, you know, put more rockets into the actual system or have many cargo containers to hold them. So, you know, so far we've actually built the ship and we've given it a purpose, but there's a couple of more things that we can add on to it. Like, for instance, here we've got a spotlight. Now, a spotlight is especially useful for mining because it will help us see in the dark places. You can turn it on and off by pressing L when you're in the cockpit, you know, on and off just like that, and you can also adjust the brightness and all that kind of stuff. It's very useful for seeing in the dark when you're mining because you do get quite a lot of debris being thrown up. Next to that, because I've turned my hood on now, you get an antenna. Now, the antenna can actually broadcast a fair distance away, but it does take up more energy the further away you want to broadcast. This is useful because you don't want to be losing your ship, and also it helps you find your way back to your base or your platform or whatever the hell you've built, because then you can actually find your way back and you can see it on your heads-up display. Next to that, we've actually got an ore detector. Now, it doesn't actually look like it does anything, but when you hop into a ship that's got it, it will show you where the ore is and what type of ore it is. This is useful for mining, obviously. It does exactly the same as a small hand drill does. And then next to that, we've got the beacon. Now, the beacon does basically the same as the antenna, only it doesn't broadcast as far, but it does give you a visual light to actually be able to spot off in the distance as well. So it depends what kind of use you want from the antenna or the beacon. Unfortunately, that is all I've got time for this episode, but do stay tuned for the next one where I'll actually be building the ship. So thank you very much for watching, leave a like and a comment and all that kind of jazz, and I shall see you in the next one. Cheers.